Jalen's fingers trembled as he erased the answer again. The class laughed, loud and cruel, while the teacher just watched. But no one knew he'd solved the impossible equation, backwards. And when the truth came out, it didn't make them cheer. It made them angrier. Because what Jalen revealed on that board exposed more than just math. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning air outside Westbridge Advanced STEM Academy carried a sterile chill. But inside, the tension was warmer, coated in quiet judgments and artificial politeness. Jalen Washington stood at the entrance of room 27, gripping the strap of his backpack with one hand, and his transfer packet with the other. 14, with neatly braided hair and wireframe glasses, he looked like any other kid in the freshman cohort. But Jalen felt the difference before he even stepped in. This wasn't like his old neighborhood school on the south side. The polished linoleum here shined too brightly. Every corner echoed ambition and quiet pressure. The kind of place where students didn't just study for tests. They prepped for legacy. This was Westbridge, home to Illinois' most elite, a pipeline to MIT, Caltech, and Princeton. And Jalen was the only black student in the entire freshman year. As he walked to his assigned desk, he could feel it. The stares, the subtle pause in whispers, the way conversations resumed once he sat down. As if nothing had happened, but everyone was watching. In the corner, a girl with auburn curls leaned toward her friend and asked, not so quietly, "You think he's here on a scholarship?" "Nah," her friend replied, eyes still on Jalen. "Probably some diversity program. They do that now." Jalen kept his gaze forward. His mother had warned him this might happen. "They'll question you before they ever test you," she'd said gently, placing his notebook in his bag. "Let your work answer them." But Jalen didn't feel ready for answers today. At the front of the room stood Mr. Ellison, the head of the math department, a tall man with wire-thin posture and a reputation for brilliance and ruthlessness. He glanced at Jalen with mild disinterest, the kind people offer when they've already decided who you are. "We have a new student," he said without looking up from the whiteboard. "Jalen Washington." No greeting, no welcome, just a label. Mr. Ellison turned back to the class. "We're starting with non-linear systems. First problem on the board." He picked up a marker and began scrawling a mess of variables and exponents in sweeping strokes. It was the kind of equation meant to scare. It took up half the board, with nested parentheses, square roots inside fractions, and a negative discriminant. A murmur rippled across the room. Jalen recognized the structure. He had seen similar problems in the workbooks his father used to give him before he passed. But he hadn't solved anything this intense in months. His fingers twitched. His heart thudded. "Let's have someone new give it a try," Mr. Ellison said, finally turning around. His eyes landed where everyone else's already were. "Mr. Washington." Jalen hesitated. His knees stiffened beneath the desk. Slowly, he stood. The silence was brutal. Not total. There was still the sound of quiet breaths and chair creaks, but it was charged, waiting, testing. He approached the board. The marker felt heavier than it should have. He stared at the equation. The logic was there. He just had to see the pattern. But his mind was swimming with too many voices. The girl's whisper, the boys laughing softly behind him, his own heartbeat. He wrote the first step, then stopped. He realized he'd taken the wrong approach. Erased it. Tried again. A minute passed. Then another. "What's the holdup?" Someone whispered loudly from the back. "You don't belong here," came another voice. Lower but meant to be heard. Laughter. Short, sharp, like knives in the quiet. Jalen froze. Mr. Ellison didn't intervene. The marker dropped slightly in his hand. The humiliation was physical now. In his chest. In his throat. But then something clicked. A piece of memory surfaced. His dad at the dining table, explaining how some equations could be reverse engineered. Start from the result, and work backward. Jalen didn't say anything. He erased everything. The laughter intensified. But he didn't look back. He began solving the equation from the bottom up. Slowly, carefully, reversing each operation, folding the logic back in on itself. A few students leaned forward. One stopped chewing his gum. The lines started making sense. Patterns formed. The nested parentheses collapsed. The impossible started to look clean. By the time he was done, Jalen had written the entire solution backward. It matched the problem exactly, and more importantly, it was right. He turned to face the room. But before he could speak, or explain, or even react, Mr. Ellison stepped forward and stared at the board. He didn't speak, he just stared. Then slowly, he reached for the marker. Jalen held his breath. The teacher underlined one part of the equation, a small notation Jalen had added instinctively, not even realizing it adjusted a flaw in the original question. Interesting, Mr. Ellison murmured. But before he could elaborate, the class door creaked open. A woman in a gray suit and a lanyard stepped in, clipboard in hand. She scanned the room. Jalen Washington, we need you in the main office. Now. Jalen blinked. Why? She didn't answer. The class stared. Mr. Ellison stepped aside. Jalen walked out, the hallway suddenly feeling colder than the morning had. As Jalen turned the corner toward the main office, he saw two uniformed security officers waiting by the principal's door, one of them holding a manila folder with his name on it. The office smelled like paper, coffee, and something colder, like quiet judgment. Jalen sat stiffly in a leather chair just outside Principal Harrington's door. The two uniformed officers stood nearby, not speaking, but their presence said enough. They weren't there by accident. The secretary wouldn't meet Jalen's eyes. She just kept typing. From the other side of the door, muffled voices argued. His name came up twice, once softly, and then again louder. Jalen's palms began to sweat. He hadn't done anything wrong. He knew that. But somehow the way they'd called him out of class so publicly made him feel like he had. The door opened. Principal Harrington, a broad older man with neatly combed white hair, stepped out with a strained expression. Behind him, another administrator quickly slid the manila folder out of view. Come in, Jalen, the principal said, trying too late to sound warm. Jalen entered. The officers stayed outside, but the door clicked shut like a warning. The office was lined with college pennants. Harvard, Stanford, MIT, but the real weight in the room wasn't from the decor. It was from the silence between adults who had already made up their minds. Principal Harrington gestured for Jalen to sit. There's been a concern, he began. Some of your classmates reported that you may have accessed inappropriate files on a school server. Jalen blinked. I don't know what that means. The principal folded his hands. There's evidence that you may have logged into faculty-only software from the classroom device this morning. Jalen's mouth went dry. I didn't touch anything except the smartboard. I just used the marker. Another administrator, Ms. Landry, leaned in. You wrote in reverse notation. Jalen looked confused. Yeah, to solve the equation backwards. Where did you learn that technique? My mom taught me. She's a math consultant. My dad used to. He stopped. Ms. Landry exchanged a glance with Harrington. Your father? Jalen hesitated. He used to work here. He helped to build the grading algorithm and the teacher access system. Marcus Washington. He died 3 years ago. Silence. That changed something. Principal Harrington's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to Jalen. Marcus Washington was your father. Jalen nodded. Yeah, my mom, Dr. Aria Washington, was part of the founding curriculum team too. The principal leaned back slowly, as if recalibrating everything. The suspicion in the room didn't leave, but it shifted, became more complicated. Ms. Landry narrowed her eyes. That explains the system familiarity. But you should have disclosed that during enrollment. My mom did, Jalen replied, more quietly now, in the family background section. Of course she did. Jalen remembered watching her fill it out online, late at night after a shift. She typed every word like it mattered. Harrington looked momentarily flustered. Well then, there seems to be a misunderstanding. That was all. No apology, no acknowledgement of the public humiliation or the threat implicit in the officer's presence. Just bureaucracy retreating behind its own formality. You're free to return to class, the principal said, already looking past him. Try to avoid further disruptions. Jalen stood, heart still thudding, his mind racing. Even with both his parents' legacy etched into the school's foundation, even with his perfect solution moments earlier, the default assumption was that he'd hacked something, broken something, didn't belong. As he walked back down the hallway, students were streaming out of classrooms. The bell had rung. He'd missed the end of the lesson. From across the corridor, a group of juniors snickered and nudged each other. That's him, one said, loud enough to catch. Jalen ignored it. But his steps slowed as he reached his locker. On it, taped with school-issue masking tape, was a yellow post-it note, handwritten, "Dumb genius, you'll never be one of us." He peeled it off and crumpled it silently. No one stepped forward. No one even looked guilty. It had blended into the noise. At home that evening, the apartment was filled with the smell of lentils and turmeric. His mother stood at the stove in her work scrubs, still half in her hospital shift. Jalen sat at the kitchen table, silent, his backpack unopened. Arya noticed. "What happened?" she asked, turning off the stove. Jalen didn't speak, just handed her the crumpled note. She unfolded it. Her eyes narrowed, not in surprise but in exhaustion. "I thought we left this behind," she whispered. Jalen shook his head. "They think I'm a mistake, that I don't belong there, that I cheated." His mother sat across from him, her hands folding slowly. "You're not there by luck, Jalen," she said. "You're there because your father helped design the very software they use to teach. Because I taught half those teachers how to integrate non-linear modeling into their damn lesson plans. Your legacy, you have roots deeper than any of those kids." He nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. Legacy wasn't visible. The room only saw his skin. The next day, word had spread, not just about the math solution, but the office summons. Rumors twisted fast. Security caught him hacking, one kid said. He tried to show off and crashed the system, said another. But the worst came during Algebra Y. 2 days later, Mr. Ellison called on Jalen again. Not kindly, not in recognition of talent. This time, the teacher said dryly, "Let's see if Mr. Washington can solve a problem without rewriting the curriculum." Laughter. Jalen stepped up to the board again, but this time he could feel it. How every eye waited for him to fail. He solved the equation. It was correct, clean. But no one clapped. No one acknowledged it. Later that day, someone added a new nickname to the group chat that most of the class used. Dumb Black Newton. It stuck. Jalen saw it weeks later, printed on a worksheet someone left behind. Doodles of equations with chains around them. A stick figure in braids, solving backwards, all traced in pencil like it was just a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was branding. Despite his legacy, despite his name being woven into the fabric of the school itself, Jalen Washington was no longer the brilliant new student. He was the punchline. One student secretly snapped a photo of Jalen's board work, his reversed solution, and posted it online with the caption, "This dumbass really thinks this is how math works." By morning it would go viral, and not for the reason they expected. The next morning, Jalen entered the classroom with a silent knot in his stomach. Part dread, part resolve. The hallway chatter had turned ugly. Whispers followed him like shadows. He slid into his seat, lowered eyes pretending indifference, but every heartbeat pounded like a warning drum. Mr. Ellison began the lesson, without glance or greeting toward Jalen. The equation from the previous day lay untouched on the board's corner, already fading. The class murmured about his freak stunt but cruelly denied him any ownership of brilliance. He fought off the urge to slump further. When they encountered a tricky non-linear system that mirrored yesterday's setup, Jalen's mind sparked again. Without meaning to, words from home echoed, "Let your work answer them." His hand lifted tentatively, silently. No one noticed. The teacher moved on, calling on Maya Bradford, the class favorite. Maya's voice was clear as she narrated a solution, step by step. Jalen recognized the logic. He'd arrived at the same result, but with a subtly different method, one that would have made the steps cleaner, more elegant. Mr. Ellison smiled at her. "Very good, Maya. Original thinking." A tight swell of frustration rose in Jalen's chest. He didn't say anything. He didn't raise his hand again. He watched Maya's recognition bloom with envy, trenching every hidden corner of his mind. The classroom buzzed with pats on the back for her. As class ended, a few students lingered around Maya, offering high fives. Jalen packed his bag slowly, but Mr. Ellison passed right by without even so much as a nod. Jalen's voice stayed caught in a web of expectation and fear. But when the final bell sounded, Jalen, needing answers, stayed. He lingered in the classroom, neatly closing his textbook, breathing in the stale chalk dust and fluorescent lights. The chatter died as students left, and the teacher remained behind the lectern, methodically wiping formulas from the board he'd dismissed only hours before. Jalen stared at the fading symbols. Pride, anger, and sorrow, tangled in his gut. His father's voice intertwined with his mother's. "They'll question you before they test you. Let your work answer them." But wasn't the test already failing? He rose quietly, took a cautious step forward, and hesitated. The door to Mr. Ellison's small adjoining closet office cracked open. From inside came hushed laughter, and an expression so venomous it stopped him cold. 3 silhouettes. 2 teachers, one unnamed, spoke in tones shot through with cruel disbelief. I still can't believe he fixed that problem backwards. What kind of freak shows up the system like that? That kid doesn't belong here. His mother might have helped set up the grading software, but that doesn't mean he's gifted. He's just bold and arrogant. Jalen's chest tightened. The words stung louder than the laughter. The betrayal wasn't raw racism. It was deeper, woven into pedagogy. Denial polished by professionalism. He wanted to yell, to confront. But before he could move, the door swung, and Mr. Ellison stepped out, smiling as if solitude had refreshed him. Silence slammed into Jalen like a physical blow. He stared. Close enough, the teacher said, voice too casual. I left your folder here. I'll hand it into the office later. The words harmless. Curt. But the air pulsed with betrayal. Jalen backed into the hallway, salivating with hurt and outrage. In the corridor mirror, he met his own eyes, crusty with hurt, smoldering with righteous fury. When he reached his locker, the whisper of pages inside revealed what he'd missed earlier. Printed worksheets from class with Maya's solution highlighted, and across the bottom, nearly invisible, a small asterisk beside a note in Mr. Ellison's handwriting. Better approach, see reverse operation notes, CJW. He crumpled the paper in his hands. No praise, no acknowledgement, not in front of anyone. A footnote, a whisper of what could have been. The bell to change class loomed, but Jalen stood frozen. Maybe it was the panic, maybe the anger. He turned and walked out, straight to the principal's office. Wanted justice, but mostly he wanted to be seen. In the empty hallway, a fellow student, light-skinned, confident, sidled up. That sucks, man, he said quietly. I saw what he did. You're way better. That slug of recognition, though faint, anchored something in Jalen's chest. As he glanced at the student in passing, he caught a flash of a surveillance camera above the office door, the image recording everything. And in that final frame, Jalen saw his own reflection, and the question, who will believe me now? 2 days after Jalen's overheard betrayal, a cold rain tapped on the academy's windows like a metronome, steady, indifferent. It mirrored the mood that had taken root inside him. He moved through the hallways like an echo, face unreadable, movements calculated. Every step was measured now. Every breath had to be earned. He hadn't spoken of what he'd heard behind that office door. Not to his mother. Not even to himself. He carried it the way a violinist carries tension. High-strung, but precise. In third period, a poster announced a surprise event. Timed logic challenge. Class-wide practice drill. 10 Pete's extra credit. Below it the phrase, no calculators, no notes, no second chances. The challenge was the brainchild of Mr. Ellison, and a visiting professor from Northwestern's Applied Mathematics Department. The pair believed pressure built character. That struggle built excellence. But Jalen knew better now. Pressure in the wrong hands was just another name for sabotage. The classroom transformed. Desks were spaced farther apart. Scratch paper, and 1 dull pencil per student. A single clock projected overhead. Digital seconds ticking loud in the silence. Mr. Ellison explained the rules with clinical sharpness. You'll each receive 3 problems. The third is optional, but will count for double if correct. The room tensed. Jalen scanned the crowd. Most were quietly hyped, especially the top-tier kids like Maya, Brandon, and Lila. The air crackled with competition. Jalen didn't flinch. He had no one to impress anymore.
Papers were handed out face down.
Begin. A chorus of flipping pages. The first problem was challenging, but solvable. Jalen moved through it quickly, his strokes mechanical, focused. The second one slowed him a bit, something about matrix transformations. But he leaned into it, remembering one of his father's chalkboard riddles. Then came the third, a beast of an equation. Nested roots, irrational coefficients, multi-step logic jumps, and a deliberately flawed variable, a time trap. Jalen paused. His pencil hovered. He knew this move. This wasn't just advanced. It was designed to buckle someone. And the someone was him. A cough. A giggle. Maya was already halfway through hers. Brandon was smirking. Someone, in the back, yawned, over-dramatically. Jalen gripped the pencil tighter. The time ticked down. 5. Then it happened. His hand moved. But not forward. Backward. He started at the bottom. He traced the conclusion and unraveled the question in reverse. This method wasn't standard. It wasn't taught. But it was how his father taught him to think. The classroom was still, but Jalen heard something crackle. Whispers. One student pointed. Another laughed. He's doing it backwards. Someone sneered. What is he, stupid? Laughter now. Rolling. Swelling. One kid snorted, so hard it echoed. Jalen kept going. Each line of his paper looked odd, alien to the trained eye. But it was elegant, clean. Mr. Ellison glanced up. His eyes narrowed. The laughter spread. Maya turned and looked. Her expression was strange, not mocking, not kind, just puzzled.
Alger the...
Jalen finished the final stroke. He slid the paper forward. The timer hit 0. Mr. Ellison collected the sheets without comment. His gaze lingered on Jalen's page. He looked again twice. The bell rang. Students poured out, still chuckling, nudging each other.
Yo, that was wild.
He wrote the whole thing upside down. Backwards genius. That's a new one. Jalen stood last. His face was blank, but his chest raging. He left without a word. That night, in his bedroom, Jalen stared at the ceiling. The laughter replayed, looping like a soundtrack to failure. But part of him didn't feel defeated. Part of him, deep silent, felt something else. Power. He'd done something they couldn't understand. Something even Mr. Ellison hadn't expected. The next morning, the scores were posted. Top score, J. Washington, 2930. Extra credit applied. The classroom was quiet. Then came the ripple. No way. He got the top score? That's not possible. Mr. Ellison entered late, holding Jalen's sheet. He didn't speak to the class, just placed the paper face up on his desk. Red ink circled the backwards logic, not with an X but with a check mark, and a single note. Unorthodox, but correct. See me. Jalen sat still. The bell rang. As students left, Brandon muttered under his breath. Probably cheated again. Freak. Only Maya paused. Her voice was soft. I reread the problem last night. The shortcut you found? I think you reversed an error in the design. Jalen didn't reply. She added, most of us just solved what was given. Then she left. Jalen waited until the class emptied. He walked to Ellison's desk. The teacher looked up, eyes unreadable. How'd you see it? He asked. Jalen said nothing. Ellison studied him. You corrected a structural flaw in the final equation. That reversal? That's not taught here. He stopped short of admiration. Jalen stared. You knew it was a trap. Ellison didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it. The silence burned. Then, Ellison did something strange. He slid the paper into a drawer and locked it. No praise. No mention in class. Just silence. As if it never happened. That afternoon, a blurry cell phone photo of Jalen's reversed equation began circulating online with the caption, "What kind of idiot does math backwards?" But within hours, the comments took a turn no one expected. The equation had caught the attention of a former Westbridge alum, now a professor at Caltech. At first, Jalen tried to pretend the laughs weren't about him. That the whispering in the hallways wasn't timed precisely to when he walked past. That the drawings left on desks weren't meant to look like him. Skin shaded with pencil a little too dark, hair exaggerated, mouth twisted into a grin he didn't wear. But the pretending wore thin fast. He began walking to class with his eyes fixed on the floor. He sat in the back of the classroom even when seats were open up front. He stopped asking questions. Not because he didn't have them. Jalen always had questions, but because he already knew the response. A pause, a glance, then the teacher calling on someone else. The worst part wasn't being wrong, it was being right, and still ignored. At home, Jalen did everything he could to hide how school was changing him. He came through the door like a quiet echo, headed straight to his room, told his mother dinner could wait. His backpack stayed zipped. The graded papers, once proudly displayed on the fridge, with a magnet shaped like a sunflower, were now crumpled and buried deep in the trash, or jammed under his mattress. Aria Washington noticed. Of course she did. She was his mother. But she also knew better than to push too hard, too soon. So, she waited. Watching. Listening. On a Tuesday night, while sweeping under the coffee table, she found one of his quizzes tucked into the spine of an old textbook. The score was high, 28 out of 30, but the page was ruined with red ink, not from the teacher, but from a student. Someone had scribbled across the top in all caps, "How much did mommy help you on this?" A crude drawing followed. A stick figure holding a calculator with welfare math written above its head. Her fingers tightened around the paper. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she made dinner like always. She set the table, called Jalen twice, then 3 times. He didn't come. That night, she placed the quiz on his pillow. Said nothing. The next morning, it was gone, and when she looked into his eyes at breakfast, there was something behind them, something locked. His sister Alana noticed too. She was home from college for winter break. A semester early, taking online classes after a change in her major. She'd always had a sharp eye, especially when it came to Jalen. They had the kind of bond built on late-night cartoons and shared grief over losing their father. "You sleep okay?" she asked him one morning over cereal. "Yeah." "Eat something more than toast?" "I'm good." She followed him to school the next day, staying back half a block. She saw how he moved, shoulders hunched, like he expected something to fall on him at any second. At his locker, he lingered, looked around, then pulled something off the metal door and stuffed it in his hoodie pocket. He didn't smile the rest of the day. That night, Alana waited until he was in the shower. Then she searched the hoodie hanging on the back of his chair. Inside the front pocket, a folded note on lined paper. It read, "You're the math monkey. We all know you don't belong. Just quit." There was no signature. Just a crude sketch of a monkey hanging from a graphing calculator. Alana froze. She wanted to scream, to break something. But she didn't. She walked into the kitchen and handed the note to her mother, who read it once and sat down hard on the edge of the counter. Neither said a word. That night, Arya sat in Jalen's room for a long time without speaking. He lay on his bed facing the wall, pretending to scroll through his phone. Finally, she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice came, thin as a whisper. "Because I knew what you'd do." She waited. "You'd go to the school. You'd make noise. And then it'd get worse." Arya swallowed. "It's already worse. I can handle it," he said, more to himself than to her. "No, baby. You shouldn't have to." He didn't respond. She stood up and placed the note back on his desk. "I'm not letting this slide," she said. "I don't care who hears me." The next morning, she emailed the school administration with a scanned copy of the note, attached it with a time-stamped photo of Jalen at his locker. Her message was calm but firm, the kind of letter she had learned to write over years of fighting subtle discrimination in professional spaces. The principal's reply came 3 hours later. "We take these matters very seriously. We will conduct a thorough internal investigation." Nothing more. No call. No meeting. No next steps. By Thursday, a new flyer appeared on the main bulletin board near the cafeteria. It wasn't printed on official school paper. It was plain white, typed in aggressive font. "Students who cheat but still get praised." Jalen's name was at the top. Underneath, handwritten black Sharpie, "Token math boy." Some students laughed when they saw it. Others took photos. No one tore it down. Maya tried to, quietly, but someone pushed her hand away. "Let it stay. It's funny." When Jalen saw it, he stopped walking. Not because he was shocked, but because he'd started expecting it. That evening, he didn't go straight home. He walked to a library 2 blocks away, sat at the last computer, and typed his name into the search bar. What came up made his stomach sink. A Reddit thread. Label, "Westbridge exposed. The diversity experiment gone wrong." It was filled with comments. Anonymous usernames, but clearly from his classmates. "He gets extra points for being poor. He solved a problem backwards and still got top marks. GTFO.
Math monkey.
Imagine getting in because your mom cried in an office somewhere." He logged off. That night, Jalen didn't eat. Didn't speak. Instead, he took his dad's old notebook, the one with the reverse logic problems, and began copying the formulas into a fresh journal. Not for school, for himself. Each line he wrote felt like reclaiming a piece of what they tried to strip away. Legacy. Not luck. Alana sat outside his door and listened to the scratching of his pencil. She didn't knock. That weekend, while the family shopped for groceries, someone slipped another note into Jalen's locker. Only this time, it wasn't handwritten. It was typed, laminated, and sealed in a school-issued envelope. It read, "You've been selected for administrative review regarding academic integrity violations. Report Monday 7:45 a.m. Monday morning arrived like a sentence. Jalen stood outside the principal's office at 7:44 a.m., holding the sealed notice like a verdict. His hands were cold despite his hoodie. He hadn't told his mother about the letter. Not yet. He hadn't known how. The words looked official, but hollow. Administrative review. as if brilliance needed permission to exist, as if logic was now suspicious. When the door opened, Principal Harrington didn't look surprised to see him, nor did he look welcoming, just tired, like someone trying to get through a task he wished wasn't on his calendar. "Come in, Jalen." Jalen entered. The blinds were drawn, the lights dim. A single folder sat on the desk, his name printed on a label in neat, black type. Across from Harrington sat Ms. Landry, the assistant principal. Her expression was blank, a mask of procedure. "We received concerns," she began, "regarding your recent scores in academic work, specifically the problem you solved during the logic challenge." Jalen didn't speak. "Several students have claimed that your work appeared too advanced to be original," she continued, "and that the method you used is not taught in our curriculum." "It's not," Jalen said quietly. "I learned it from my dad." Ms. Landry's brow tightened. "Do you have proof of that?" "My dad's dead," Jalen replied. "The proof is in his old notebooks. I can bring them." Harrington interjected, his voice low, calculated. "We're not accusing you, Jalen. We're just doing our due diligence. For transparency." Jalen swallowed. "Am I being punished?" "No. But you won't be eligible for extra credit or honors placement until we complete our review." His heart sank. "So I did everything right and now I have to wait?" "It's protocol," Ms. Landry said flatly. Jalen left the office without another word. By third period, the news had already spread. "Jalen's being investigated. He's under academic review." Guess the math monkey got caught cheating after all. The words slid through the hallways like grease, sticking to his shoes, his clothes, his mind. Teachers didn't look at him the same. Even Maya kept her distance, not out of malice but fear. The isolation was complete now. That night, Arya found the envelope in his backpack while searching for his homework. She didn't scream. She marched. The next morning, she stood in Principal Harrington's office before the bell rang. She didn't make an appointment. She didn't need one. "My son is not under review," she said, voice firm but contained. "He is being targeted. There's a difference. Mrs. Washington, I assure you, this is standard." "Don't insult me. I helped build this place. I trained half the teachers in this building on curriculum scaffolding. And now you're telling me my son is too advanced to trust." Harrington shifted. "This isn't personal. That's the problem," she said. "It should be." Later that day, she submitted an official complaint, then another. She attached every note, every photo, every slur Jalen had received. Attached screenshots of the Reddit thread. Circulated the names of students she suspected were behind the posts. She asked for an independent review. The district sent back a single sentence: "We are looking into it." Jalen watched her fight. He watched his mother become the storm she used to shield him from. But it didn't stop the feeling that something inside him was breaking slowly. Precisely. He began missing answers on purpose. Not enough to fail. Just enough to blend in. If he couldn't win by being exceptional, maybe he could survive by being average. But the damage had already been done. 2 weeks into the investigation, a junior named Shane, known more for his loudmouth than his GPA, accidentally left his laptop open, in the library. Jalen, walking past to return a book, caught a glimpse of something on the screen. A private forum. School-colored header. Title: Westbridge Watchdogs. Thread titles: Affirmative Action in Action. Why do we keep lowering the bar? The backward genius. Let's talk about him. Jalen froze. He took out his phone and snapped 3 photos before Shane returned. That night, he showed Alana. Her face turned pale. "This isn't just cyberbullying," she said. "This is a coordinated campaign." They forwarded the screenshots to their mom, who sent them straight to the district, and to a civil rights attorney she knew from her activist days. But the most chilling discovery came 2 days later. One of Jalen's friends from his old school, now a coding hobbyist, used the forum screenshots to cross-check usernames. He cracked one. Admin name: T. Elliott. Mr. Thomas Elliott, a Westbridge senior, National Honor Society, student government liaison, and Mr. Ellison's nephew. The forum wasn't just run by students. It was protected by them. That night, Arya received a call from a blocked number. A voice on the other end whispered, "If you keep pushing this, you're going to ruin everything for your son, and for yourself." Then the line went dead. Emily Tran had always marched to the beat of her own drum. Quiet, observant, and sharp, she moved through Westbridge's hallways like a pulse, urgent and unwavering. On the surface, she was just another high achiever president of the coding club. volume tracker on everything, poised to ace even the most intimidating math challenges. But after she privately witnessed what Jalen endured, the murmurs, the notes, the jokes, something shifted. Jalen. The name kept floating back to her, haunted, bruised, and undeniably brilliant. She'd seen how teachers brushed past him after he solved problems they couldn't, how classmates wore his genius like a badge of mockery rather than respect, and how he recoiled as if the bright light of intelligence burned too fierce. The night after the anonymous flyer listing token math boy and his name at the top, she couldn't sleep. She replayed his haunted expression in class, and the way he sat alone in the hallway while others filtered past, laughing. That image stayed with her like a fracture. She decided then, no more silence. Over the next few nights, Emily gathered evidence. She discreetly documented the hateful notes she saw at Jalen's locker. Monkey math scrawled beneath his name. Go back home taped inside his combination. She captured screenshots of Reddit and forum posts mocking him. Anonymous voices casting stones from behind screens. She recorded the dismissive nods from teachers, the rolled eyes when Jalen was praised. Every cold shoulder he received, she transcribed overheard whispers. He doesn't belong here, word for word. Each night she added to a file she titled, Voices Against Jalen Washington. Meanwhile, Jalen kept retreating. In his room he stared at the notebook his dad left behind, filled with backward equations and logic puzzles, but he didn't open it anymore. Instead, he stared at his reflection in the mirror, wondering if brightness could feel like burden. On a Friday afternoon, Emily approached him in the library. He looked up from his geometry book, defensive, drained. Hey, she said quietly, voice gentle, as if she feared her kindness might break. I've seen what's happening. You don't deserve what they're doing to you. Jalen swallowed. Why are you talking to me? Because no one else is, she said. Your story needs telling. And I want to help. He blinked. Something like hope flickered in his chest. Over the weekend they met. She shared her file, and he nodded, stunned by her bravery, and the truth. He opened the notebook again, this time writing new equations with deliberate intensity. Something shifted. In the quiet of his room, he began to feel seen. Monday morning, Emily passed out copies of a typed exposé she'd printed. 20 pages of documented bullying, transcribed notes, screenshots, and photos, with a clear headline, Westbridge, Meet the Real Math Kid, The Life Behind the Laughs. It was anonymous. She printed the pages and left them in teachers' mailboxes, posted them on the community boards, and uploaded them to the school's digital notice board, where student stories occasionally ran. Jalen saw one paper stuck to the hallway glass. His name, in bold, under the title. He froze. Will this help? Or just highlight me again? He thought. By lunch, the exposé had spread. Phones passed it between students. Teachers paused in hallways to read. One coach wiped away a tear. In classroom, silence followed the realization that the caricature they'd accepted afternoons ago was a kid worth listening to. Unexpectedly, the school's digital screen, usually reserved for club announcements, displayed a photo of Emily and Jalen together, their heads close over math notebooks. The caption read, Who's telling his story? The viral moment rolled. The exposé gained traction outside school. A local education blog picked it up, how one student broke the silence on institutional bias. But the school's reaction wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of support, Emily received a summons to the dean's office Tuesday morning. She walked in, mind racing. The dean's face was calm, but rigid. Emily, he began, voice low, bureaucratic. We received your document. Anonymous sources like this. We appreciate the sentiment, but we need names. You put yourself at risk, and others too. Her presence faltered. You understood that by posting this you may face disciplinary action. Her voice shook. I was protecting someone who couldn't protect himself. The dean leaned back. We're investigating. If you can come forward formally, it'll help. Otherwise, this could become a significant infraction. Emily's shoulders sagged. Back in the hallway, Jalen found her. She peeked around the doorway. They walked out in silence. You okay? He asked. She forced a small smile. I'll be fine.
They want to silence you, he said softly but fierce.
They stood in the empty hall, 3 weeks of pressure tightening around them. Later that night, the school's headmaster posted an official letter to the school app, praising Emily's concern for student welfare, while warning that unauthorized dissemination of sensitive materials can be harmful. But buried in the school's internal portal was a private memo, One line that made Emily's blood run cold. Find the source before the district finds us. The morning after Emily's expose went viral, Westbridge Advanced STEM felt like a stage suddenly drenched in cold light. Hallway chatter shifted from silent snickers to hushed whispers of vindication, or reprisal, depending on whom you asked. Jalen carried himself with careful calm, the weight of every glance hanging like an accusation and apology in the same breath. By midday, even the air felt fractured. When the principal's voice came through the PA system, it sounded rehearsed, flat, void of any real compassion. To any student who felt marginalized, we extend our sincere apologies. The announcement cut off mid-sentence, swallowed by the echoes of bell clangs and shifting desks. No one knew who it was meant for.
No one mentioned Jalen's name.
He sat at the back of Algebra 1, shoulders rigid, fingertips tapping the edge of his desk. He felt numb. That evening, Arya read about the apology on a local education blog. She called the principal. He gave rehearsed lines. Our intent was not to single out any student, but to address the climate of unease. She pressed. There was no acknowledgement, no ownership, and no mention of my son, or how deeply he's been hurt. On the school's social media page, a carefully worded post appeared. Westbridge Academy regrets that any student felt marginalized. We are committed to fostering belonging and accountability, and welcome ongoing dialogue from our families. All caps, no name. At home, Jalen sat in his room, staring at the blank pages of his father's notebook, still untouched since last week. The apology felt broken. It smelt of policy, not penance. That night, he dreamt of the whiteboard again. Not the complicated equations, but the moment when he solved it backwards, when logic bent to something deeper. The dream fractured in a classroom full of eyes that laughed, not with him but at him. The next day, Mr. Ellison entered the room without greeting. The apology had passed like a whisper. The only current of noise left was how it had resonated through every nerve of Jalen's flesh. Mr. Washington, come up and solve the problem again. The class stared. It was the same equation, the non-linear system from weeks ago. Jalen's palms prickled with dread. He walked to the front, each step a measured beat. He didn't look at Ellison, but through him, at the board, he saw not just the numbers but the crowd, the apology's emptiness, the weight of legacy. He began writing. Every move felt familiar, practiced. Comments ricocheted off his skin as he erased mistakes and folded logic in reverse. The marker traced backward steps, building truth from the bottom up. When he turned, the transparency in the room felt stark. Everyone saw it again. Even Ellison paused. But then Ellison spoke, quieter than expected, and killed the light final. That's adequate. Adequate. Not brilliant. Not real. Jalen's chest seethed. He hesitated, reached for more, and then stopped. The bell rang. He walked back, shaking. The classroom resumed in snatches of specious normalcy. After class, Emily caught up with him. They apologized but avoided your name, she said softly. Her voice trembled outwardly so he'd know someone felt it for him. Yeah, he said, voice tight. They apologized to Shadow, not Light. That night, Arya confronted the school's board of trustees via video meeting. When they brought protocol, she brought pain. When they offered reassurance, she demanded justice. One trustee said, "We are reviewing internal policies." Arya leaned forward. Don't review, act. Meanwhile, public pressure mounted. An op-ed had popped up in the Tribune. Westbridge's half-apology highlights what it refuses to see. But back inside the school, the apology's emptiness echoed in decisions cloaked as fairness. As for Jalen, at home, when he sat at the dining table that night, the usual dinner smells curry, lentils, garlic felt foreign. He couldn't eat. Arya placed a plate in front of him. Your dad used to say that hunger is not just physical, she said. Sometimes it's longing for truth. He stared at the food. Later, asleep in his room, a reflection from his phone glowed on the wall. The school announcement, asking for dialogue, seeking feedback, promising belonging, none of which felt tangible to him. The next morning, school email alerts lit up phones. All students are required to complete a bias and belonging module before the end of the week. This includes a mandatory meeting with homeroom teachers, but burrowed inside one student's forwarded note was a chilling sentence. This is not for learning, it's for control. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across room 207, stretching the whiteboard's complex scrawls into elongated shapes that seemed to pulse with expectation. Jalen sat alone, the only student remaining after class, tracing the lines of numbers and symbols that had haunted him for weeks. It wasn't the logic he questioned anymore. It was the system. Mr. Ellison stood beside him, the air between them charged with something new. Curiosity, not calculation. You found something, Ellison said quietly, almost reverently. Jalen nodded, hand trembling as he circled a subtle inconsistency. An algebraic assumption buried in the framework of the equation, one that had gone unnoticed for perhaps years. Most students and teachers simply accepted it, but Jalen, working backward and forward, had seen the fragile confusion in the logic, the way the equation folded in on itself at a specific point. It was a flaw that, when corrected, streamlined the entire solution and multiplied his own understanding. His voice betrayed exposure, more than knowledge. This right here. It doesn't hold unless that coefficient is adjusted. I think it was a misprint. If you change it, the equation solves clean. Ellison leaned in, studying the line. A flicker passed across his eyes, one of something that felt like recognition. But before he could speak, the classroom door swung open. Someone entered, a substitute teacher for the day. Ms. Powell, bright-eyed and fresh from training seminars about inclusive classrooms. She gave a nod to Ellison and made her way in. Unexpectedly, Ms. Powell leaned over the board, glanced at the circled part, and gasped softly. I've taught derivatives in nonlinear modeling before, she said, voice hushed. That coefficient, you're right. It's been marked down incorrectly since, I'd guess, the first edition of the curriculum. Her eyes shifted to Jalen, wide with quiet respect. You're the only student I've seen who's ever caught that. The moment hung a flake of truth in the infinite calculus of silence. Ellison closed his eyes, hand resting on the edge of the board. When he spoke, his voice was distant. That's brilliant, Jalen. It wasn't praise, it was a whisper of something heavier. Word of the correction rippled through the faculty, faster than the students. Jalen's mom received a call, professional, clipped from the math department head, acknowledging the correction. But tone mattered. It felt like an admission, not an accolade. At home, that night, Jalen placed his father's notebook on the table. The old wrinkled pages seemed to glow in lamplight. His mother studied it. I knew he was brilliant, she said, voice shaking. But you're rewriting logic. Jalen nodded. He opened his notebook to the margin where he'd scribbled the correction, underlining it 3 times. The weight of legacy finally felt less suffocating and more real. But not everyone saw it that way. The next day at school, rumors had multiplied. Some students whispered, he's trying to make the teacher look dumb. Another group said, I bet he'll get into trouble if they change that question. Can't admit a black kid knows more. The tone wasn't sneering. It was anxious.
Miss Powell, in her morning class, placed Jalen's work under a projector. She explained the corrected method calmly, crediting him. A few students stared. Some nodded, skeptical. But Mr. Ellison remained silent. His eyes scanned the room, not at Jalen but at the board, the correction, After class, Brandon cornered Jalen in the hallway, tone brittle. You trying to ruin the test for everyone? Now we all have to learn that dumb backward thing. Jalen shrugged. I fixed something that was wrong. Brandon sneered. That's not your job. As the day wore on, something else cooled. Ellison's demeanor. He stopped offering those subtle acknowledgments. His tone returned to flat. The correction stood, but as a quiet threat, not an honor. That evening, Emily approached Jalen in the courtyard. They're calling you structural flaw guy. Better than math monkey, Jalen replied. Eyes bright, she frowned. It's not just jokes anymore. I heard some seniors pushed for you to be removed from advanced classes. That this is disruptive, because now they might actually have to work. Jalen clenched his fist. At night, he opened his laptop and submitted his notes to an online academic forum, anonymously, explaining the correction, without drawing attention to himself. To his surprise, within hours the post received responses from codebreakers, professors, and math enthusiasts. It went viral among educational circles, far beyond Westbridge. But someone with influence took notice in a different way. The next morning, Jalen got a school-authorized email. Effective immediately, you will not be allowed into the advanced elective this semester. Reassignment follows curriculum rotation. He stared at the screen until the words blurred. No punishment. Not officially. But a backlash. A resegregation. At home, Arya watched his shoulders collapse. They're afraid, she said softly. Jalen didn't respond. That night, he opened his father's notebook again and wrote at the top of a blank page, if they can't understand correction, maybe they don't want understanding.
The pen trembled. The next morning, Jalen received an unexpected invitation to present his correction at the district STEM showcase. It came with a note. Your work is undeniable, but will the district be ready for what you're exposing? The following day dawned heavy with threat, a prognosis of change before dawn. Jalen's mother, Aria Washington, had received the tip in the gray hours of dawn. Mr. Ellison had never just transferred schools. He had been quietly relocated, years ago after an investigation for racial bias, information she never would have uncovered without a whistleblower emboldened by conscience. At first, disbelief shuddered her chest. She stared at that unverified message, typed calmly, clinically, the phrase racial bias investigation stark on her screen. Then she knew. Truth didn't always ring. Sometimes it whispered first. She called a trusted colleague with access to HR archives, someone still inside the union. Within hours, the rumor had flesh, a buried complaint filed at his previous school, archived under staff concern, detailing behavior that systematically discounted black students. He'd verbally minimized their questions. He'd invited ridicule instead of support. He'd discouraged advanced placement, veering subtly into disregard. One line, so cold, it burned, read repeated bias concerns, masked as pedagogical examples. The transfer to Westbridge had been advertised as a promotion. In reality, it was carefully concealed. A wardrobe, not a resolution. At home, Aria scanned the document until relief and rage wove into a single thread. She reminded herself, this wasn't just about Jalen. It was about all the unbalanced power margins people like him, minority teens at elite institutions, walked every day. That evening, she handed the documents to Jalen. He listened in silence. At 15 years old, one of the smartest kids she'd ever known. And now the world felt different to him and to her. The impossibility of escape from institutional history settled in like frost. Why didn't the school tell me? He asked finally, voice tight as steel reinforcements. Because they can't police truths they don't want found, Aria replied quietly. A week later, she filed an official complaint with the state education board. She included the HR memo. She sent a copy to her district representative. The next morning, students lined the hallways. But not for classes. Rumors swelled. Some whispered, I knew something was off. Others said, now we know why he's like that. Ellison's posture changed. Where once there had been arrogance, now there was a brittle armor. Teachers avoided him. Students watched with uneasy curiosity. Emily, too, had noticed. The girl who once compiled evidence, observant, resolute, approached Jalen in the empty hallway. Now people will see, she said. Her hand trembled slightly. He nodded, though his world felt off-axis. Ellison, meanwhile, summoned to the office, didn't fight. His eyes told the story. A teacher betrayed by the very system that must have once elevated him. Meanings shifted. That night, alone in his room, Jalen stared at his father's notebook, filled with equations, corrections, logic that once broke him out of tragedy. He thought of Ellison, of betrayal twisted into false authority. At 11:32 p.m., his computer pinged with an unknown sender. The message read, I leaked it. You deserve to know. Attached was the full personnel file memo transcript, dates, the suppressed HR department entries, the official-looking header, no name, but a signature. His pulse thrummed. At 7:45 a.m., Emily texted him a file saying, we have to get this in front of everyone. They printed everything, page by page. That afternoon, they walked together into Ellison's classroom, their steps unhurried but determined. He met them at the door, expression closed, whatever composure left on loan in that moment. You leaked it, he said quietly, not accusatory, resigned. Emily straightened. Yes, you shouldn't have taken him, or any student, to a place without accountability. Ellison's eyes flickered, then turned away. I understand. The school board convened an emergency meeting. By evening, teachers sat stiff. Principal Harrington and the district liaison traded looks. Aria stood in the doorway. No program, no announcements, only tension. Harrington spoke first. There's a complaint with credibility. We're investigating. Aria interrupted. You had that document. Her voice, usually soft but precise, carried weight. You were complicit. The faces in the room shuddered. Ellison's chair groaned as he shifted backward. That night, Jalen lay awake, dreaming of logic shapes, the way equations shifted, folded, revealed themselves. He thought of the notebook, open on his desk. The geometric curves seemed to vibrate with something new. Potential. The next morning, an email flashed in Arya's inbox, sent from the Attorney General's Public Affairs Office. You and your son have triggered a civil rights inquiry. The line sat heavy, like both vindication and premonition. Before she could open it, another message arrived from the teachers' union, claiming Jalen and Arya had filed a defamation suit, threatening Ellison's emotional stability. They demanded a restraining order be considered by the district. The school auditorium smelled like polished floors and hushed resolve. White parents in tailored attire murmured at rows of folding chairs. On stage, the Board of Education sat stiffly, a circle of authority that seemed distant, untouched by the reality beyond the glare of presentation lights. Arya and Jalen sat together on the front row, shoulders pressed as one. They had come to speak the truth. But before the meeting could begin, the murmurs began. A woman stood, voice reinforced with practiced irritation. I'd like to say I'm appalled. Your activism is tearing us apart. Western Bridge was renowned for its excellence. And now, we're being painted as discriminatory. Maybe if your family had kept this quiet, none of this would be happening. We're not trying to silence anyone. They should be grateful. Polite applause rippled. Arya's throat tightened. Jalen's breath caught. A man stood next, voice smooth but with a tightening behind it. I'd like to ask, is this about academic integrity or public reputation? Because there's a difference. If Jalen's methods are creative, fine. But when it becomes performance, not scholarship, we're undermining fairness. He's disrupting our community. The phrase "just be grateful" hung in the air, sticky and belittling. Arya took a deep breath when she finally had the floor. My family isn't here for an apology. We're here for justice. For my son. For every student without a voice. This isn't about reputation. Reputation is fragile. Integrity is not negotiable. Whispers shot through the auditorium. Her words landed, humming with heat. Still, as parents left their corners, forces shifted. An unofficial campaign began to crystallize under the banner of academic integrity, a euphemism dressed for action. Within days, a group of parents gathered in hushed tones in front of Westbridge's ornate clock tower. Photographs of their children lined picnic tables, symbolic evidence of expectation gone wrong. A petition circulated online and on paper. For the fairness of all students, we call for review of the Washington file and consideration of removal from elite academic programming. Emails arrived in Arya's inbox, disguised as solicitations. Considering relocating your scholar? Perhaps you should review your options. Westbridge might not be the same anymore. Rumors spread. They're trying to turn the school into a social experiment. Another voice tinted with dread. It's the diversity push gone too far. Emily received messages too from parents in the coding club. One wrote, "Your activism is admirable, but please don't tarnish our trust in Westbridge." Another texted, "Think of your future job references." It wasn't just Jalen who felt the peel of isolation. It was the whole family, bending back under the weight of resentment, claiming to be fairness. At home, Arya and Alana sat at the table under the glow of a single lamp. Alana broke the silence. "I saw the petition. They're calling for you to be expelled, for misrepresenting academic rigor." Arya sat, stunned by the nakedness. "I thought they believed in merit," Alana said. "They believed in safety," Arya replied. "And now they've weaponized it." Jalen, sitting nearby, spoke quietly for the first time in days. "They're telling you that you're only valuable if you don't make them uncomfortable," he said softly. "That standing up is selfish." But something quiet shifted too. Beneath anger woke resolution. Arya stood the next morning, wearing confidence like armor. She approached Principal Harrington's office and leaned forward. "Academic integrity," she said, "is about fairness. These aren't complaints, they're attacks. I won't let them erase the very things that make Westbridge a place of real brilliance." Harrington looked away. "Here, handle this." But the campaign didn't wait. A blog post surfaced, ghostwritten, but unmistakably from a parent perspective. Titled "Protect Our Standards," it portrayed Jalen as a disruption. A disruptive foreign gift, whose presence devalued every other achievement. Downloads poured. Local media sniffed. Arya accepted an interview under tight studio lights. Voice steady as stone. "My son didn't ask for special treatment. He deserves recognition for his intellect, not the spin of race. Academic integrity is not a tool to silence brilliance. In the court of public opinion, she felt the pushback sway. At school the next day, Jalen walked the halls like fog, partly visible, partly dissolved. Teachers avoided him. Parents glared. The petition's second iteration demanded a hearing before the school board, co-signed by over 100 families, and called for immediate re-evaluation of his enrollment privileges. In homeroom, his teacher passed out a note. Academic performance review by student request. Jalen stared. No one asked him, but the outcome was clear. In the faculty lounge, the rumor had reached Ellison. The petition had used math itself as a weapon to obscure bias. He sat quietly, bottled with shame. At home that evening, Jalen's mother held him. "They want you gone," she said. He nodded, tears tangled with anger. "But you're still here," she said. That night, Alana confessed, "I hate how few allies remain, even teachers." Arya cut in. Most were silent too long. Each silence made this possible. Jalen sat at the whiteboard in his room, pen poised above paper. He traced the flawed coefficient he'd corrected so long ago. Some marks are deeper, he thought, when the resistance climbs from fear. Days later, a new notice appeared on the school's entrance. All students must reaffirm the academic honor pledge by signing an updated integrity code, and tucked below it, in fine print, new parental change. Failure to sign, or suspicion of coercion, will result in administrative review. A demand dressed as unity, begging the question, which side are you on? The hallways of Westbridge felt colder that morning. Windows reflected empty mouths and slipping smiles. Jalen carried a single sheet in his hand, his SAT prep results. He stayed silent under the fluorescent lights, the numbers tight against his chest. He'd seen them online before classes started. Someone leaked it, likely a parent or student with access to internal systems. The rumor labeled him a prodigy, walloping juniors he wouldn't even meet. It called him a show-off, a threat. He walked into English class, eyes forward. The teacher, Mr. Davis, greeted him with nods to others. No immediate judgment, but whispers trailed his steps. "You saw Jalen's SAT score?" "Yeah, that kid's in a league of his own. Way above seniors." That morning, the auditorium filled with senior parents and teachers for the SAT workshop results session. Supposedly a review, but it felt like a stage set for comparison. Word traveled fast. Jalen's name was at the top again. Arya arrived, to find a cold sea of nods, some sympathetic, many distant. She sank into a seat, her son beside her, invisible within the achievement that had given him power and torn him apart. Ahead, the SAT coordinator attempted controlled neutrality, in tone. "I'd like to congratulate our top scorers." The names scrolled past. Top juniors, top seniors, valedictorian candidates. And he paused. High school freshman Jalen Washington. The auditorium feared the word prodigy. Now they recoiled. That afternoon, Jalen sat in the library. He had nowhere else to be. Emily appeared, sat beside him. "All eyes on you, man." He didn't respond. "They're calling you the freshman freak, saying you're turning junior competition into a joke." Jalen pressed the paper in his hands. "It's just numbers." She caught his gaze. "It's not numbers for them. It's fear." He shrugged, watching the page. "I did the work. They're saying it's unnatural advantage, that you're forced." He looked at the scores again. "I stayed up longer. I studied harder." He knew it was true. He had earned the scores, but excellence wasn't enough anymore. 3 days later, a letter slid into his locker. Disciplinary meeting, Thursday 3:00 p.m. Principal's office. No reason given. When he got home, Arya didn't ask. She only squeezed his shoulder. In the meeting, Harrington's office felt harder. Desk polished, walls lined with awards that glinted with dissonance. Jalen sat facing Harrington, Miss Landry, and the board liaison, a group set to decide. "Judge Jalen," Harrington began, tone neutral but weighted. "We're concerned about your academic involvement. Some parents have raised questions about the fairness of your placement. They say the numbers are skewing perceptions." Jalen's heart hammered. "These complaints suggest your performance may affect student morale, progression, and perceived equity. They're asking." He held himself still. "Your SAT prep score, your classroom corrections, your leadership with Emily, they're all part of this perception." "Perception?" Miss Landry leaned in. "We need to ensure that competition stays fair programmatically. Sometimes, top performance requires pathway reevaluation." Jalen's voice cracked. "They're saying I'm a problem." Arya spoke before he could stop her. He's not a threat, he's a student. Harrington closed his eyes. We have to manage community expectations. That was it. The community had shifted Jalen from inspiration to scapegoat in 3 swift breaths. That evening, Arya called her civil rights attorney. The lawyer's voice was sharp over the phone. They're using academic integrity to mask discrimination, she said. We can fight this. Jalen listened. You might need to withdraw temporarily, the lawyer continued, but we can sue for harassment, unequal treatment. Jalen felt the sentence settle in him. Not relief, but cold clarity. School hallways blurred in the days that followed. Teachers whispered. Parents watched. Jalen's world narrowed to the timeline. Disciplinary meeting Thursday. Emily met him after school, hands shaking. They're building a case, she whispered. They already framed you. Jalen rocked on his heels. I didn't break anything. She nodded. Doesn't matter. The night before the meeting, Jalen and Arya sat over notebooks and legal letters, and SAT scores, old notebooks of his father, and his mother's calm rage baked into every sentence of complaint filings. They interrupted the quiet with urgency. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, head heavy with the fight ahead. At 2 a.m., his phone lit with a text from an unknown number. Do not trust Emily. He froze. He looked at Emily's name from earlier, then at his mother sleeping. By morning, the note was gone from his phone, but the fear had settled. Thursday arrived. Jalen sat facing the board again, not his mother this time, and brand new attorneys across from him. The door cracked open behind them, and in walked a familiar face. Emily ushered in as school counsel. She wasn't there to testify. She'd taken a new role, and that silenced him more than their shame. The morning of the filing felt both ancient and urgent. Jalen stood before the mirrored doors of the county courthouse, windows reflecting his own bristling silhouette. Behind him, Arya held her head high. The crisp air felt heavy, but lighter than the loneliness of unspoken truths. In the hands of his civil rights attorney, the complaint trembled with clarity. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, claims of racial harassment, institutional bias, and calculated retaliation. Pages detailed every insult, every locked-out advantage, every slur disguised as academic critique, all tied to systemic patterns. A direct line had been drawn, from whispered diversity quotas to parent-led campaigns demanding his removal. The equation of justice was simple, yet explosive. When the filing happened, the courthouse lobby buzzed. Reporters pressed recorders toward statements, and cameras lighted Arya's firm words. This is never about favoritism. It's about refusing to stand for injustice when it survived in silence. By noon, Westbridge Academy's reputation, polished like its marble floors, fractured under national headlines. Local news anchors' voice trembled with the gravity of the moment. Print outlets splashed coverage across websites. Freshman sues elite school over racial discrimination. Prodigy or punished. A civil rights case at a STEM academy. Inside Westbridge, paranoia and denial entwined. Emails circulated between parents, some expressing support, many defensive, worried about college acceptances, alumni donors, and the school's carefully curated brand of excellence. Board meetings turned fraught. Principals fielded phone calls from alumni who said scholarships were at risk. Counselors asked students to stop talking about Jalen in hallways. But community activists attended too. A church choir sang from Kids Bop hymnals, on a microphone borrowed from Alana's dorm. They raised tears and hashtags across social platforms. Justice for Jalen, when Black excellence threatens, igniting solidarity from progressive networks in Chicago and beyond. In the weeks leading up to court dates, Jalen's schedule paused. He moved through tutoring sessions for SAT-focused underclassmen, coached by Emily. Algebra receded into paperwork. Courtroom readiness replaced academic excellence. At home, nights were spent tracing depositions, practicing testimony, writing out what it meant to be a child meeting his burden of proof before the law. His father's notebook, once corners of comfort, now lay stacked on his desk, notations stained with inkwell rage. Arya attended every fundraising assembly. She organized community gatherings, math circles at local libraries, racial justice workshops at church basements. Even Alana, studying from afar, built a Slack channel with college groups, exploring systemic inequality. On legal days, every meeting in the lawyer's office felt saturated. The walls, once drab, were now charted with timelines, cross-references, comparisons to landmark cases. Her attorney quoted precedent in Title VI itself, and then said something grounding. This could reshape how elite schools think they can raise question marks around genius. When the school's legal team responded, they didn't deny the filing. They leaned into procedural messaging. We will vigorously defend our institution. We operate at the highest standards. We take all allegations seriously, but without public accusation, we cannot comment on personnel matters. The press interpreted the silence. The courtroom outside became a mirror. Flashes behind cameras. Questions from anchors about whether false claims could backfire. Inside private sessions, Jalen prepared. Every question could feel like accusation. Are you choosing this path for attention? Are your grades so exceptional you're misunderstood? He rehearsed answers. He choked back words like systemic and took them down to I did what any student should do. Stood up to unfairness. By spring's edge, high school graduation dawned closer. Caps, gowns, speeches. It loomed like a stage carrying both rejection and recognition. The courthouse door opened, one last time, not for trial, but negotiation. The school made an offer, a settlement. Quietly, counsel offered confidentiality and amnesty for academics. Arya listened. She agreed with her eyes. Jalen didn't come this far to let justice be silenced behind boardroom curtain. Then came the scheduling. The judge ruled that the case would be heard after graduation. Jalen closed his locker with returning dread. He'd faced the same class, same hallways, same voices. Diplomas awaited, but so did the confrontation of their shared history. His senior project, once designed as a math thesis on reverse logic, was now accompanied by a legal brief. He titled the joint presentation, Algorithm of Equity, Solving Backward to Move Forward. Graduation rehearsals felt surreal. His classmates who once wrote monkey math on spreadsheets now paraded alongside him, tassels slipping like assurances. Teachers said little. Parents in the audience shuffled. The official photos would show polished faces, not broken systems. On graduation day, the banners read, Class of 2025, but for Jalen, they whispered future reckoning. He walked the stage to receive his diploma. Hands shaking slightly, he looked out across the crowd. There, in the sea of robes, faces shaped his path. The girl who taped poverty math to his fridge, the parent who petitioned his expulsion, the teacher who quietly corrected him, under the weight of institutional silence. Graduation didn't erase their betrayal, or his brilliance. Early morning light filtered through the gym's tall windows, dust motes dancing across the polished floor, like silent witnesses. Word had spread among students that today, something unexpected might happen, an unspoken chance for healing. Jalen sat quietly in the sea of black gowns lining the floor, the stole around his neck heavy with the weight of what had come before, and the promise of what might come next. He glanced at Emily, seated a few rows away, her presence a steady anchor throughout the storm. She gave him a reassuring nod, her eyes reflecting a quiet pride, and maybe unspoken relief. Behind both of them hovered a tense hush, deepened by anticipation, because today, truth would surface. The principal took the stage, voice trembling with emotion. Before we begin, we have an unexpected opening in our ceremony. A hush fell, heads turned. Then, a figure walked boldly onto the stage. Marcus Ellis, the same boy who'd thrown cruel nicknames onto Jalen's locker months ago. The auditorium exhaled. Marcus cleared his throat, voice catching as he faced the crowd. I want to apologize. I endured the jokes. I laughed along. I was silent when Jalen was humiliated for solving math differently, backwards. I thought it was weird. I thought I was protecting myself from ridicule. But I was wrong. I was cowardly. The room went still. Years of jeers, whispers and posters, now hung refracted in apology. A few students gasped. Jalen's heartbeat thudded, not because he expected an apology, but because it was real. One by one, heads rose. Students who had stayed silent began to speak. Alex, standing next. I called him dumb Black Newton. I liked the laughs. I saw him as an oddity, a sideshow, but he's a person, and I'm sorry. Then Mara, juniors, seniors, voices trembling, matter-of-fact admissions of shame and regret. The auditorium turned confession chamber, each voice peeling away layers of cruelty. Jalen felt the hall breathe with confession, letting truth displace shame. Still he stayed seated, absorbing every face that had stepped forward, every tear shed in apology. Then the unexpected twist came. Arya rose uninvited. She held a binder overflowing with letters, messages of support from alumni, educators, Even civil rights advocates across the country. She read one aloud. A black mathematician who'd followed Jalen's story and wrote, "He reminds me that equations can reveal more than answers. They reveal barriers." A teacher wrote, "My own school refused my logic like I was the flaw. I see that's changed here." Arya's voice wavered with pride and pain. "These are not weak words. They are strength and solidarity. Those who speak for justice, not silence, are building something stronger than fear." The binder passed from hand to hand, shoulders squared with new awareness. Jalen watched as the room leaned into empathy, collectively admitting how many began as silent bystanders. The principal returned to the mic, breathing deeply. "Thank you to everyone who chose truth today. Now, Jalen, would you say a few words?" The spotlight found him. He stood, cap in hand, voice steady but resonant. "Redemption, real redemption, never comes from silence," he began. "Silence is the absence of truth. Truth doesn't always comfort. It confronts, it demands, it breaks. But if we let it redeem us, it can rebuild us." He paused, scanning faces marked with new clarity. "This school once treated my brilliance as a disruption, because I stood differently. But when voices speak, not to tear down, but to understand, we can transform hurt into healing." A hush fell. Then the hush lifted into applause, not polite, but fervent, liberating. It started near the stage, rose to a wave that crashed through seats. Phones captured the moment. Tears glistened on cheeks. It wasn't performance. It was redemption. Students rose to their feet, clapping for truth, for bravery, for unexpected change. Emily rose and stayed standing. Marcus stood, shoulders shaking. Faculty joined, proud, ashamed, hopeful. After the applause waned, Jalen stepped down. He passed Emily in the aisle. She caught his hand. Silence between them carried thanks deeper than words. At home later, Arya and Alana hugged him, silent, then tearful, then proud. Alana said, voice soft, "You changed us." He nodded. Hard lessons, greater truths. Days later, an email landed in Jalen's inbox. "Dear Jalen, your words at commencement saved us all." It was signed, a Westbridge alumnus, the valedictorian from 20 years ago, who had seen everything unfold. But his message added one line, "Meet me, we have equations to rewrite." Sunlight filtered softly through the towering MIT lecture hall windows, illuminating chalk dust suspended like memories in the beam. Dr. Jalen Washington stood confidently at center stage, the youngest black professor in his department, his presence calm, unwavering, powerful. Before him sat students from every corner of the world, leaning forward waiting. On the board behind him glowed the familiar nested equation that once humiliated him, floored him, now framed in triumph. He cleared his throat, voice resonant. "This isn't just math," he began. "It's transformation. That same equation, the one that once branded me as the problem, today, we teach it." He walked the class through the forward logic, breaking the system free from its backward origins. Every step was clear, every insight intentional. He paused. Math evolves. Truth emerges from how boldly we confront our past mistakes, even when they're with us backwards. The students listened, their faces lit by comprehension and something quieter empathy. Jalen stepped aside, letting them absorb the lesson. His mind replayed the day he stood in his freshman classroom, marker trembling on the board, laughter jagged in the air, and that gut-twisting moment when he rewrote the problem from the bottom up. Logic, dismantled. Truth, reconstructed. That moment had branded him. He steered the class forward, but the echoes of ridicule never fully left. Tonight, that memory no longer wounded. Instead, it fueled a new legacy. As the lecture neared its close, Dr. Lila Muin, renowned senior faculty in applied mathematics, entered unexpectedly. She nodded, seamlessly joining the narrative. She stepped to the board and extended Jalen's reversal into a broader theorem, an elegant forward-synthesized proof. It was a result even he hadn't conceived. Students gasped. He stepped back, breath caught. She whispered, "You cracked it. I just refined the lens." It felt like redemption, multiplied. Students flooded him with questions afterward, some tentative, some urgent. A young black woman in the back hesitated, then spoke. "I struggled with that equation, until I remembered how you approached it." Clarity backs courage. Jalen softened. "That's why we teach," he said. And this time, the words didn't tremble. They landed. Later, in his office, his former Westbridge classmate, a now data scientist, knocked and entered. She held a small chalk sketch. "You inspired me," she said quietly, voice thick with gratitude. "You shaped my choice, made me believe in brilliance born from struggle." He nodded, tears bright. Legacy was louder than silence. Months passed. The journal published his equation, crediting the backward insight as forward innovation. It circulated widely. Data on inclusive pedagogy cited it for transforming how brilliance is taught. He donated his father's original notebook, a slim relic of reverse logic paths, to MIT archives under Stories That Teach Us. The notebook now sat alongside scientific giants and social justice milestones. MIT began a yearly lecture series, Backward Logic, Forward Thinking. Students reenact the steps that once humiliated and now illuminate. At home, the Washington family gathered around dinner, the notebook resting beside them. Alana picked it up, tracing the inked lines. "Dad's logic lives on." Jalen nodded. "Every solution teaches us more than math. It teaches resilience." Arya reached across to squeeze his hand. The words weren't necessary. Months later, as the screen fades, Jalen turns from his office, closing the door to Polia Lecture Hall. The camera shifts to the chalkboard outside. A simple line of chalk, Jalen Washington. Solved backwards. Still right. But as the shot widens, it becomes clear. It's drawn backwards. His name, his thesis, the logic. It is reversed. And then, blackout. If you've ever been silenced, doubted, or told you didn't belong, Jalen's story is yours too. Because this isn't just about one boy and one equation. It's about every voice they tried to erase. Type yes if you believe brilliance should never be buried. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eyes.